Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the world of Atheris, where light and darkness coexisted in a fragile balance, the ancient prophecies spoke of a time when the shadows would rise and threaten to engulf all. Only the chosen Lightbringer could stem the tide of darkness and restore peace. For generations, the Lightbringer had been nothing more than a tale passed down by priests and scholars. But now, as the dark forces spread like a creeping plague, the world was in desperate need of that prophecy to come true. Leah knelt before the grand altar of the Temple of Light, her heart pounding in her chest. The air inside the sacred chamber was cool, almost frigid, and it seemed to press down on her, wrapping around her like a suffocating cloak. She'd been an ordinary priestess only days ago, tending to the wounded, offering prayers for the fallen, and performing simple blessings. But everything had changed when the high priest called her into the sacred chamber. "You are the Lightbringer, Leah," the high priest had declared, his voice echoing in the marble chamber as if the walls themselves acknowledged the weight of his word. His ancient face had been set in a mixture of sorrow and resolve, as if the burden he placed upon her was as much a curse as it was a duty. "Teach, the time has come for you to fulfill your destiny." Destiny? Leah had never believed in such things. She was just a priestess, humble, without any grand ambitions or secret power hidden within her. She had watched the high priest lay his hands upon her, chanting the sacred words, yet even as the light of the gods filled the chamber, she felt nothing but doubt. "I don't understand," Leah whispered, her hands clenched in her lap as she knelt. "How can I be the Lightbringer? I'm no warrior. I can barely hold a sword." "The Lightbringer is not defined by weapon. The light comes from within. Leah, the gods chose you because they see something inside you that even you do not understand yet. You must trust in their wisdom, and in time, you will come to understand." Now, as she knelt at the altar, Leah could feel the eyes of her companions on her. Arthur, the stalwart knight, who had been assigned to protect her, stood behind her like an immovable statue, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. His presence was reassuring, but also intimidating. He had seen countless battles and carried the weight of his past on his broad shoulders. Then there was Mia, the enigmatic mage who had joined them at the request of the Council of Magic. She had a sharpness to her intellectually and emotionally. Leah often wondered if Mia trusted anyone but herself. "We need to move soon," Mia said, breaking the silence that hung over them. Her voice was crisp and practical, a sharp contrast to Leah's soft uncertainty. "The dark forces have been gathering near the Shadowlands. We won't have much time before they start their full assault." Leah looked up at the glowing crystal that hung above the altar, its light warm and pure. She had been chosen to protect that light, to restore balance to the world.
But how could she, a simple priestess, stand against the growing darkness that threatened to consume everything?
"I'll be ready," Leah whispered, though the words felt hollow. She stood slowly, her legs trembling beneath her robe, and turned to face her companion. Arthur's face was stoic as ever, his brown eyes hard with determination. He gave a slight nod as if sensing her doubt, but choosing not to address it. "Stay close to me," Arthur said, his deep voice resonating in the stone chamber. "The journey through the Shadowlands will be dangerous. You may be the Lightbringer, but that doesn't make you invulnerable." Leah managed a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll do my best." They left the temple at dawn, the sun casting long shadows across the land. A cold wind blew from the north, carrying with it the scent of decay. The closer they traveled to the Shadowlands, the more oppressive the air became. Fields that had once been lush and green were now blackened. The trees twisted and gnarled like the skeletal hands of the dead. The dark magic that lingered in the atmosphere seemed to sap the very life from the world around them. "Keep your wits about you," Arthur said as they crossed into the Shadowland. The ground beneath their feet was uneven and cracked, as if the earth itself had been torn apart by some ancient battle. These lands had been corrupted for decades. The darkness here ... Mia adjusted the staff she carried, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. "We need to move quickly. The creatures that dwell here won't hesitate to attack if they sense weakness." Leah swallowed hard and nodded, but with every step the weight on her shoulders grew heavier. She could feel the darkness pressing in, not just around her, but within her own heart. It whispered to her, insidious and quiet, feeding on her fears and insecurity. You were not the Lightbringer, the voice inside her hissed. You were just a girl pretending to be something more. You'll fail, and the world will fall because of you. She shook her head, trying to clear the dark thoughts from her mind, but they clung to her like a second skin. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Arthur's hand went instinctively to his sword, and Mia raised her staff, her fingers already crackling with arcane energy. From the shadows ahead, a group of twisted, grotesque figures emerged. They were creatures of darkness, their bodies malformed and hunched, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Shadow fiends," Arthur muttered, drawing his sword in one swift motion. "Stay behind me, Leah." Leah's heart pounded in her chest as the creatures advanced, their guttural snarls filling the air. Arthur charged forward, his sword gleaming as it cut through the first of the fiends. Mia's magic followed, bolts of light flashing from her staff and striking down the creatures with deadly precision. Leah stood frozen, her hands trembling as she watched the battle unfold. Arthur and Mia were fighting with all their might, but the creatures kept coming, more of them spilling out from the shadows like a tide of darkness. "Leah, we need you," Mia shouted, her voice strained as she fended off another fiend. Use the light. The light. Leah's mind raced, but she had no idea how to call upon the power within her. The fiends were closing in, their eyes fixed on her with a hunger that sent chills down her spine. She could feel the darkness pulling at her, trying to drag her down into the abyss. I don't know how," Leah whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. "You have to try," Mia cried, her magic faltering as more fiends surrounded them. Leah closed her eyes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She reached deep within herself, searching for the light that the high priest had told her was there, but all she could feel was fear and doubt. The darkness was too strong. "No," she muttered, her voice trembling. I can do this." The fiends were upon her now, their claws reaching out to tear her apart. She could hear Arthur shouting, but his voice seemed distant, muffled by the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from within her, so bright that it forced her eyes open. The fiends recoiled, hissing and screeching as the light burned the twisted form. Leah's hands glowed with a warm golden radiance, and as she raised them, the light expanded, driving the creatures back into the shadow. For a moment there was silence, then, slowly, Leah lowered her hands, her body trembling from the effort. "You did it," Arthur said, his voice filled with awe as he sheathed his sword. "You saved us." Leah stared at her hands, still glowing faintly with the light. She had done it. Somehow she had called upon the power within her. But the feeling that followed wasn't triumph, it was exhaustion, and a deep gnawing fear that this light would not be enough to stop what was coming. "Let's keep moving," Mia said, her voice softer. "Now the temple isn't too far. We need to find the artifact before the darkness grows stronger." Leah nodded, her legs unsteady beneath her as they continued on their path. The battle had drained her, and though the light had saved them this time, she wasn't sure it would be enough to defeat the darkness that still lay ahead. Leah's legs felt heavy as they trudged forward through the eerie silence of the Shadowland. Her breath came in, shallow, ragged gasps, and each step seemed harder than the last. The golden light that had saved them from the fiends still lingered faintly in her hands, but it was dim now, barely enough to illuminate the path ahead. Arthur and Mia moved with grim determination, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of more enemies, but for the moment all was still. The oppressive atmosphere of the Shadowlands was as thick as a blanket, suffocating and heavy with the presence of dark magic. Leah could feel it gnawing at her from every direction, whispering in the back of her mind that she would fail, that the light inside her was too weak. She had drawn upon it once, but the effort had left her drained, unsure if she could do it again when the time came. "We were close," now Arthur muttered, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but it carried a note of reassurance. "The temple should be just beyond this ridge. If the artifact is there, we'll find it." Leah swallowed, her throat dry and aching. The thought of finding the artifact, the very thing they had been searching for, filled her with equal parts hope and dread. Hope that it would help them in the fight against the darkness, but dread at what she might have to do with it. The weight of responsibility felt unbearable. Mia, walking ahead with her staff, glowing faintly, glanced back at Leah. Her sharp, discerning gaze softened ever so slightly. "We'll be ready when the time comes. You don't have to carry this alone." Leah offered a weak smile, though she didn't feel comforted. The light inside her had saved them, but it had taken nearly everything she had to summon it. And the thought that the darkness might strike again, stronger this time, weighed heavily on her mind. They reached the top of the ridge, and there, in the valley below, stood the ancient Temple of Light, or what remained of it. The once grand structure, built of gleaming white stone, was now crumbling, its walls blackened by the touch of dark magic. The massive doors were broken, hanging from their hinges, and the once sacred grounds surrounding the temple were overgrown with twisted, thorny vines. A cold wind howled through the broken arches, carrying with it a faint mournful whisper. "This is it," Arthur said quietly, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "The artifact should be inside." Leah stared down at the ruined temple, her heart pounding in her chest. The place reeked of darkness, its malevolent energy pulsing like a heartbeat. She could feel it pressing down on her, stronger now, and it took all her willpower to keep moving forward. Mia was the first to descend the ridge, her staff raised high as if warding off the dark magic that clung to the air. Arthur followed, his steps steady and deliberate, his eyes never leaving the temple's entrance. Leah trailed behind them, her hands trembling as she gripped the pendant that hung around her neck, the symbol of the Lightbringer. She prayed silently that it would give her the strength she needed. As they approached the temple's entrance, a low growl echoed from within the darkened hall. Arthur immediately drew his sword, stepping in front of Leah protectively while Mia's staff flared with bright blue light. Leah's ice breath caught in her throat as shadows shifted inside the temple, and from the darkness emerged a creature unlike any they had faced before. It was massive, its body formed entirely of writhing shadows, its glowing red eyes fixed on them with an intensity that made Leah's blood run cold. Its form shifted and twisted constantly, never settling into a solid shape, and the air around it crackled with dark energy. Arthur wasted no time. With a battle cry, he charged the creature, his sword slashing through the air in a brilliant arc. The blade struck the creature, shadowy form, but instead of cutting through it, the sword passed harmlessly through the darkness. The creature lashed out with a massive arm, sending Arthur sprawling to the ground. "Arthur," Leah cried, rushing toward him, but Mia stopped her with a firm hand. "Stay back. It's not a normal creature of darkness," Mia warned, her voice tense. "It's a shadow wraith. It can be harmed by physical weapons." Leah's heart sank. A creature that couldn't be harmed by ordinary means. How could they hope to defeat it? Mia stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed in concentration as she raised her staff. "I'll need time to cast a spell that can disrupt its form. Keep it occupied." Arthur grunted as he stood, his armor dented from the blow. "I'll do my best," he said, wiping the blood from his lip. He squared his shoulders and faced the wraith again, circling it carefully, looking for an opening. Leah's mind raced. She could feel the light within her flickering, but it was weak, and the darkness surrounding the wraith was overwhelming. She had no idea how to summon her power again, especially not in time to stop this creature from destroying them all. But then she remembered the words of the high priest, "The light comes from within." Closing her eyes, Leah took a deep breath, trying to shut out the chaos around her. She reached deep within herself, searching for that light, that spark of hope and strength she had felt before. It was small, barely there, but it flickered in the depths of her soul, waiting for her to call upon it. "Leah, hurry!" Arthur's voice snapped her out of her thought. The wraith was closing in, its form shifting and twisting as it moved toward them. Arthur was doing his best to keep it at bay, but without a weapon that could harm it, they were running out of time. I don't know how," Leah whispered, panic rising in her chest. Mia's voice cut through her fear. "You can. You did it before. The light is in you, Leah, but you have to believe it's then there." Leah clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. The light was inside her, but it wasn't just a weapon. It was a part of her, something deeper than power. It was hope. It was love. It was the will to protect what mattered most. And with that thought, the light flared to life. Her body glowed with a brilliant golden radiance, brighter than it had ever been before. The wreath recoiled, screeching as the light pierced through its shadowy form, disrupting its hold on the physical world. Lietza's heart pounded, but this time it wasn't Terrell from fear. It was from the pure raw power flowing through her veins, the power of the Lightbringer. "Now, Mia," Leah shouted, her voice strong and clear. Mia didn't hesitate. She raised her staff high, chanting an incantation in a language Leah didn't recognize. The air crackled with energy as Mia's spell built to its peak, and then with a flick of her wrist, a beam of pure light shot from the staff, striking the wraith in the chest. The creature let out a final deafening screech before it dissolved into nothingness, its shadowy form dissipating like smoke in the wind. For a moment, the temple was silent. Arthur sheathed his sword and looked at Leah with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You saved us again," he said quietly. "You really are the Lightbringer." Leah's legs gave out beneath her, and she sank to the ground exhausted. The glow around her faded, leaving her feeling weak and drained, but the warmth of the light still lingered inside her, comforting and steady. "We were not done yet," Mia said, though. Her voice held a note of relief. "The artifact is still inside. Let's hope it's strong enough to turn the tide." They entered the ruined temple, the oppressive darkness slowly giving way as the light inside Leah flickered weakly but steadily. At the center of the hall, on a stone pedestal, rested the artifact of light, a small simple crystal that glowed faintly in the dim light. Leah approached it, her heart pounding. This was what they had been searching for. The key to restoring balance, the weapon to defeat the darkness. But as she reached out to take it, a voice echoed through the hall, a voice that sent chills down her spine. "You've come far, Lightbringer, but this is where your journey ends." Leah's hand froze just inches from the artifact as a figure stepped out from the shadows. The Dark General. His presence filled the room with a cold, suffocating energy, and Leah's heart sank as she realized the final battle had just begun.